Good evening and welcome. Thank you for being patient. We're not allowed to start early, and then when we wait for 7 o'clock, we end up starting a few minutes late. So always a few minutes at the end there. So thank you for being here. I'd like to call the Wednesday, December 21st regular meeting of council scheduled for 7 p.m. to order. And the first item is the adoption of the agenda. We have a number of minor and one major change to the agenda. In terms of minor, there is a handout that has come from the delegation that will speak on the Sunshine Coast Homelessness Advisory, so there's some additional paper that's been distributed for that. We have an amended bylaw for item 8.1C. I think that's the only one. 8.1C, an amended bylaw for that, which adds, and when we get to that, we'll identify a couple of words that needed to be put into the bylaw. And thank you very much for those who are watching and reading carefully enough to find those errors. And I was thinking of errors. One of the reasons we do things in public is because we have people watching in public and reading in public. And when you see the number of little errors that they catch, it makes me wonder what would happen if we did everything in camera. It'd probably be an absolute disaster. So thank you for finding that. And we also have under item 10.3, we'll add a brand new business item, item 10.3, and that will be a recommendation coming out of the Parks and Planning, Parks, Environment, Public Works, Parks and Environment Committee from this afternoon. And that's a recommendation regarding Mission Point Park. So we'll just add item 10.3 and we'll call that Mission Point Park. And when we get to that, we'll have somebody from that committee speak to the issue and the reason for it being brought forward so quickly. I'm sure there will be one. So with those three amendments, two substantive in the sense that they're changing the order paper and one paper which comes in under 3.1. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda as amended? Councillor Inkster and Councillor Lutz, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Moving right along then to our delegations and appointments this evening, we're pleased to have Casey Laviolette from the Sunshine Coast Homeless Advisory Council. Oh, is it a council or committee? Council. Okay, you call yourselves a council, that's good. And to speak on two things. One, the issue of homelessness quickly, but also there's a possibility of a response in terms of a building that could be used for shelter over the long term. And that's where we want to have it out in the public and think about that for a moment too. So if you'd like to come forward, and we'll turn the microphone on. Yep.
Hello. Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Casey Laviolette, and I sit on the Sunshine Coast Homelessness Advisory Council. I'm on the steering committee of that group. And very briefly, we are the group that over the last 6 years has applied for funding to operate an emergency cold weather shelter here on the Sunshine Coast. This year, the contract for operations has gone to Rain City Housing, and we have the manager of Rain City Housing locally here, Alicia Ladouceur. So as we all know, homelessness is a big crisis right now on the Sunshine Coast. There are easily hundreds of people who are homeless, many of them here in the district. And the current shelter at St. Hilda's Church has room to accommodate between 8 and 10 people per night. Although upwards of 20 people have been staying there since it opened in October, but they're crammed in quite tightly, and tempers have been flaring. RCMP and ambulance have attended multiple times, so it's not safe for the people staying there or for the staff. It's only operating between 4 p.m. and 8 a.m. And so during the day, people who are staying there have nowhere to go, especially on weekends when things are closed. It's very difficult for them. And St. Hilda's has said that as of the end of April of 2017, that space will no longer be available. So they have quite graciously offered that space for the last 4 years, but they're not able to do so going forward. So our council, from about this time last year until now, have been looking quite hard to find a space, both short and long-term solutions to address homelessness. So we've approached multiple groups on the Sunshine Coast, multiple private landlords and not-for-profit groups, and asked them if we can use their space, and it's been unsuccessful to date. So we don't know what we're going to do come May 1st. We certainly don't know what we're going to do next winter. We have no viable option. I can tell you that BC Housing, who funds operations of the shelter, is very interested in working with local stakeholders here, including our group and the local governments, but they're looking to us to do a lot of the legwork in finding the space and finding an operating agency. So we're lucky that we have Rain City. They're really experts in the field. Our biggest hurdle right now is space. So about 2 weeks ago, I was approached by the Sechelt Indian Band, who have a property at 5600 Sunshine Coast Highway that they were going to move to one of their other properties, and then have been recently talking about having it demolished, and to put out a tender to find people who are open to demolishing it. But at the last minute, council and staff there thought that it may be useful to offer it to the Homelessness Advisory Council as a space for a shelter, not necessarily a permanent solution, but something to expand the current capacity of our shelter now. So they're willing to sell it to us or to another interested party for $1. But there are some significant moving costs and building costs associated, which you'll see in the document that I provided. So behind me is Ben Smale from the Sechelt Indian Band, and he's the one that put this document together. So our council have 2 requests for the District of Sechelt. Number 1 is your support and assistance going forward in coming up with a sustainable solution to address homelessness on the coast. And number 2, more specifically, is your assistance in helping us attain this building and find a property to move it to through the funds in your affordable housing fund. I recognize that the money in that fund is not necessarily enough to pay for all the costs, and we are willing to do the legwork to approach other local governments and the provincial government and local stakeholders to work with you to find a way to make this work. But we need your help.
Thank you very much, and I'm sure there'll be comments from Council first, and then I'll say a few things about process and funding. And just to give an estimate to those who didn't see the handout, the estimated cost mid-range for the costs of just moving this would be $330,000. That would be moving new furnaces, making sure it was operational and safe. And that's the mid-range estimate on a Class C, I think it was, Class C estimate, Class 3 estimate, which begs, that's a lot of money to spend prior to land on what you've just admitted would be a temporary solution or midterm solution at most, a couple of years. So we want to think that one through seriously. Councillors, it's obviously a pressing public issue. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you.
Oh, and just before you start, could you tell me who is on the council, like in terms of organizations and connections? Is it
Sure. So the steering committee is made up of myself, Matt Thompson from the Affordable Housing Society, Suzanne Richter, who's the manager of mental health and addictions, Alicia from Rain City Housing, and a volunteer named Kelly Foley, and a representative of St. Hilda's Church named Meg Stevens.
Thank you. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. A few questions. I know that you went to look at the building. You know, you had some concerns initially whether or not the building would be suitable for what you were looking for. So if you were to get this building, how many could this proposed building shelter at any particular time?
Well, I would look to Alicia for some guidance on that, but I think we could easily double capacity. Upwards of 40 people could stay there. Additionally, there would be space for the homelessness outreach worker who works with Rain City to work there. There'd be space to operate a drop-in area if we could get BC Housing to pay for operations to keep it open 24/7, which they've said they're open to discussing. Then it could be available for people who are homeless to come during the day for meals and warmth.
Okay, and I know that down the road, you are looking for not only a building for homeless people, but transition housing, et cetera, as well. So that any kind of timeline as to when something like that would be available, because you'd be looking for this building to be a stopgap measure.
Correct. So there are two things going on at once. There's addressing the immediate issue of homelessness now, and then long-term, the province and the health authority and Rain City Housing are in talks right now to look at building a permanent shelter and some transitional units somewhere probably within the district. But that is 3 to 4 years away.
Okay, and one final question. What is your timeline to move the building?
Well, Ben has told me that the new tenant for that property where the building is located is hoping to move in February. So it's quite soon. We have a month and a half to figure this out.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Any other clarification, or are we ready for some Councillor Inkster, and then we'll get to some comments?
So the new tenant that's moving in with the building existing there, because most of these costs are related to having to move the building. So you have this perfectly good building that you have to find a home for. The new tenant, as discussed, and the lease that they're putting on the land would not include a building that would just have less parking. So there's just no room for that perfectly good building that could be used by a group on that property. Yeah.
I can't speak to that,
Yeah, he's shaking his head.
and Ben can't speak to that either. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I can't speak to it.
Oh, you can't speak to it? Oh, okay.
But we know the answer.
Is no, they don't want it? Okay.
It's not.
There's, what I can publicly say is there's a public tender for demolition of that building. That's what I can say for certain. So I think that speaks enough for what your question is asking.
Well, you don't have to accept the tender, but if the plan is to demolish it, other than if it doesn't get moved, then that's where the decision is made.
No, there is a temporary building that's available, but there's a location that's needed. And there's also this is where community emergency measures run into government processes. So we can refer this to the budget process to see what may or may not be available. And there certainly isn't funds sitting anywhere that could sort of match this. There are smaller amounts in the affordable housing reserve. Whether that could even be used for this, as opposed to establishing affordable housing, as opposed to the kind of social need that this is addressing in terms of an emergency shelter, would be one question. And we're not sure of all the funds that are available for that, but it looks, what's confirmed tonight before the meeting was under $100,000.
Under 100,000?
Under 100,000.
Okay.
Confirmed by our chief financial officer, who's been checking all those books. Now, there may be other places that things are parked, but that's what we think is available. And that would have to go into our budget process, which we're happy to refer it to, and I think probably should be referred to as a place where we can start to think about the long-term need. And there is the second part of your request, which was support for long-term. There is a real question that this council will have to debate on whether or not the district should be stepping into provincial jurisdiction in such a bold way, even when there is a need. We know there's lots of needs, but that's one, we really don't have the resources to deal with it, but the province doesn't seem to be there. Is that on?
No, I had Councillor Lutz and I had
Councillor
another
Lutz?
question.
Can I speak
Yes.
to Mayor Milne?
Yeah,
To your
go ahead.
point. So, first of all, I recognize that the cost of this is quite huge, and it may seem outrageous to move a building when why couldn't we just open a shelter in an existing building?
There is no
But there
existing buildings.
just really isn't anywhere. And maybe that's a role the district could play, is helping us find a building. You may have more leeway in that than we do. I don't know. And then in terms of whose role it is, that's not for me to say. But I think from the talks I've had with BC Housing over the last couple of years, they are really looking to local experts here to help them figure out where and how to spend the money, because they don't know the Sunshine Coast like we do and like you do.
Yeah, support is one thing.
Yeah.
Councillor Lutz.
That was where I was going with my questions. What kind of support would BC Housing give to this kind of a building if it was on public land or if it was on private land? Who owns it? How do you organize the funding for it? Under what kind of an umbrella? Have you looked at those questions so that we can hear some of the answers?
Well, we've thought about it very briefly. Admittedly, we haven't had much of a time frame to look at this. Our big ask is that the building become a district asset to be moved onto district property, and that there may be existing properties in the area that the district could take possession of or purchase or negotiate with, for example, the Ministry of Transportation, who owns a property just over here. We're in no position to purchase anything, and we're a little bit uncomfortable asking BC Housing to buy something now when we know a few years from now they're also going to be looking to buy something for the permanent shelter.
Mm-hmm. But to follow up on that, it looks to me like about $165,000 simply to move it into storage. Say we had an empty lot L somewhere and you wanted to store it. It would be $165,000 to $170,000, and then it would have to be moved again to a site that was suitable within the area that's more suitable for servicing and social assistance. So this is a major hurdle. So just because it's sort of there and about to be demolished it might not be the gift that people think it is. Councillor Inkster.
Thank you. One of the problems is that if in fact we were looking for district land, we'd have to look for district land most likely in the downtown core, because of the needs identified by those that use the shelter. They tend to want to be in the downtown core, and they tend to want to be centrally located in Sechelt, as they have been. So that's probably where we'd look. In the past, there has been some partnerships that have come together, but they've come together over a number of years. Arrowhead's a good example. The Green Court Housing Project, but that's come together over a number of years where the districts worked with Green Court, but more with Arrowhead to come up with a plan. And we were able to build a number of units, but not of a temporary nature that you're asking for, and of such a more of a sheltered nature than a permanent housing solution. So that has been done in the district. And I'm sure there's models throughout BC of communities going into those areas, but I'm sure they're well thought out funding models that have a large portion of the funding come from the provincial government. So I'm racking my brain thinking what will work, and I've seen it happen before in Sechelt, but it's taken a number of years, and there's a clear funding model that comes mostly from elsewhere.
Well, that's why I wanted it out here, so people could rack their brains and start to think, and there might be something emerge from that. We do have a lot of untenanted commercial buildings on the downtown core, and we've had various thoughts of how to create a bylaw that would create an incentive for those to be used. And maybe if we put in that, one of the incentives that if it's not used in a commercial way within 6 months, it becomes a homeless shelter for the next season, would move things along, or provide great locations for shelters, because people do need, it's a reflection on the quality of life in our community and a reflection of the values that we have, which is the moral burden coming. The jurisdictional and intergovernmental burden is not one I'm as willing to accept. But Councillor Seegers and then Councillor Shanks.
One other question. I know it's BC Housing that provides the funding for operating.
Yes.
So, and they provide a certain level of funding based on how many the building will hold or whatever. So have you had conversations with them that if, for miracle happened and we actually did this, that they would actually fund extended services?
Not, well, they are aware of this offer from the band, and that we're here tonight talking to you, and they want to be involved and kept up in the loop. I can tell you that back in August, when we were promised funding for shelter for the coming season, they told us that if we could find a bigger space, then they would fund staffing for it, but we just couldn't find a bigger space.
Okay, thank you.
And Councillor Shanks.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. Initially, I have some concerns in terms of how this has been presented to us, not by yourselves, but I'm willing to move it to, or recommend that it go towards our budget discussions.
Thank you.
Process.
And that's, I think, the best place for it to go. Then we can start looking at it for a long term and see what kind of reports we need for it at that stage. I wouldn't be hopeful of any short-term solution. And I would say, as much as you identified it as an offer from one government jurisdiction, it isn't really. It would save them some money on demolition and contracting and other things. So it would help them solve a problem, but it isn't actually one that comes with much support. So we have a motion seconded. Thank you. Further discussion before we vote on that, Councillor Lutz.
I just wanted to
You've got it.
I just wanted to say that the mayor and I attended a meeting with Vancouver Coastal Health and others, and homelessness was a big part of that discussion. And it's something we need to address. I too think this is short-sighted because we don't have enough information. We don't have any guarantee of support from the other agencies. But I think if we take this seriously and have the discussion, you're going to get through this winter somehow, and hopefully we can be closer to a solution by next fall. Thank you.
And Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. Referring this to staff, will that look at things like potential land, cost to move it, where the funds would come from, all of those things? Or are we just looking at?
It'll start by putting it into the budget process, where we can first of all see if there is what kind of budget allocation we could provide to start then asking those questions, because we don't even know if there's money for land or to consider land. If it's in the public now, hopefully people will also be thinking about what potential land is available and what might be. And the key thing here is that appropriate servicing for the homeless on the Sunshine Coast is likely to be located between its current location at St. Hilda's and the conveyor belt, and between the water and the hydro lines. It should be in the downtown core. And that's, so an idea of putting it out in some other remote or resolute area doesn't really count. It has to be downtown.
Okay, and a follow-up, we do know Ministry of Transport has that one piece of property. Would staff be available or able to approach them to see whether or not that could be something that could be available?
We could make that as a separate motion after it goes to budget, just that staff contact the Ministry of Highway to see what's available. So first, the one to refer it to budget. All those in favor? And a second motion by Councillor Seegers that directs staff to contact the Ministry of Transportation to verify what land may be available. Seconded by Councillor Lutz. Thanks. And all those in favor? That will at least get two conversations going. And I think there is a sense that it's closer to this table than it was. So thank you for that.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Better. Good. There are no proclamations today, so we move to item 5, which is adoption of the minutes of the previous council meeting. And first are the one-page minutes of the 4 p.m. regular council meeting, pages 6 and 7. A motion to receive and adopt. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Shanks, all those in favor? That's carried. And moving to item 5.2, minutes of the 7 p.m. regular council meeting. And motion to receive. Councillor Lutz and Councillor Seegers. Any errors or omissions? I did want to say that I was reading them over today and thought there was a slightly more formal tone in grammar, sentence structure, and language, and I appreciated it. So whoever's working away on the minutes now, thank you. Councillor Seegers?
You're first.
You know,
I thought that was on from before.
oh,
Councillor
you're,
Shanks.
you're probably right, but you have to be quick at this game.
Errors and omissions at this point.
No, I'm just thinking, it was brought to our attention earlier today as regards receiving minutes and adopting minutes. And we had some minutes that came back for adoption. And I'm wondering if in fact it should be our practice to receive and adopt minutes.
We receive them, we look for errors and omissions,
And then you adopt
and
them.
we adopt them
Okay.
once we know there are errors or omissions.
Fair
I don't know
enough.
what you do
Fair
in
enough.
committees, but
Okay, good. Okay, thank you.
thanks for that clarification, though, because we do not want to adopt them, though, until we know they're more or less correct. Councillor Seegers.
One error, page 9. That's a small one. First paragraph, end of the first paragraph, it's Western Cedar, not Western Cedar.
Oh, yeah.
Just missed an end of the first paragraph.
Yep.
On page 9.
It's in the
2 of
italics.
11.
Page 2 of 11. Yeah.
2 of 11.
Sorry.
Bottom of the first paragraph.
Last sentence.
It's Western Cedar, right? And then when we're looking to adopt these, I'd like to pull recommendation 10.2 and discuss separately. Thanks.
That would be business arising after we've adopted them. If you don't, we have to adopt them. There's either errors or omissions, or we'll adopt them and then there's business arising. I'm not quite sure what you have in mind. You don't pull minutes from previous weeks for adoption. You'd prefer to pull that so we don't adopt it? Okay. Yep, yeah, that's appropriate. Okay. So, Councillor Seegers, on the minutes, and it's not business arising.
No.
Okay.
So you want me to talk about 10.2?
Yeah, I'm
prior to?
not sure the process, but go ahead.
Okay. So 10.2, we actually referred this to staff for review and analysis. And recently had Urban Systems come forward with reports, and we had our customer satisfaction survey, and they came, that was another one. And in both cases, we spent a lot less money, and they came before us and actually presented. So I'm wondering, this recommendation is that it go to staff. I don't recall what the contract was with the group, Deloitte, with regards to this, and I'm wondering why we referred it to staff and not actually had them come and present the findings to us.
I think they're two separate questions because I wanted them to come. I understand we would have them
Yes.
come at some point. but referring to the staff, they may come at the same time. Do you recall why they submitted it but didn't actually come to speak to it at the time? Was that part of the contract, or to the Director of Corporate and Financial Services?
Unfortunately, Your Worship, I don't believe that was part of the contract to have them, present a report to council. I can confirm that. I'm not recalling seeing it when I read the terms of reference. It was just to prepare the report and submit it, but I can certainly confirm whether that provision was in there or not.
Or see if they'd be willing to do that at the same time that staff is bringing it back. It seemed unusual to me that consultants did a report of that nature and then didn't come to speak to it. It's usually just, so if it was left out inadvertently, or, that we could ask if they would like to speak to the report, and if not, why not? That would be interesting. I think we'll just give that as direction. Are there any other, that would have been business arising, as far as I can tell? Not at this point. We can make a new motion as after business arising. So just as a point of procedure, that was a question that arose from the minutes and therefore would have been business arising. Adoption of the minutes of the regular council meeting of Wednesday, December 7th, 2016, with the errors noted. All those in favor? Any further business arising? Okay. Moving on to item 7, which is commission minutes and reports. The first one is a summary of recommendations of the Planning and Community Development, and pages 19 to 25. Motion to receive. Thank you. Any of those recommendations need to be pulled out? Seeing Councillor Seegers.
Yes, this was on the Trail Bale Development Pet Value Permit sign, Development Variance Permit sign for the sign. When this came to committee, there was discussion that this should be discussed by council before moving forward with the recommendation.
Okay, so you'd like to pull recommendation 14? Or 15?
15.
15, okay, we'll pull 15.
Yeah, thank you.
Any others that we should pull? And then we'll look for a motion to adopt recommendations 2 through 14 and 16. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Lutz, all those in favor? And that leaves us with recommendation 15, which is Trail Bay Development's Pet Value Development Variance Permit. And Councillor Seegers will speak to that.
Thank you. I'm wondering if the chair wants to speak to this or if he'd prefer I do it.
No, you go right ahead.
Okay. So when this was when this was presented to committee, it was presented that the sign itself, the part that lights up, is actually within the sign bylaw. There is a black border that is not lit that goes behind the sign. And that, with that piece, it is bigger than what our current sign bylaw allows. So while we said, technically it does not fit within the sign bylaw, the portion that's lit does. And so we wanted to have council look at it before we moved it forward and voted on it.
Okay, does staff have any comments on this from when you brought it forward? I know we don't have the report with us, but just to clarify those. And then Councillor,
Yeah, also,
I'll let Councillor Shanks speak first.
in addition to Councillor Seeger's comments, there was some indication that this is a bit of a different scenario where traffic along Toreto Street, because it is traffic going by and it's a little different than Cowrie Street, that the signage should be somewhat larger than normally be on Cowrie Street. And for that purpose only, even though it conforms in its actual size of lettering, it was felt to be a need that this should be a more prominent sign, and it's nowhere near the size of Rexall or Clayton signs. So there was argument on behalf of the proponent that we should allow this sign to occur simply from the aspect of visibility from traffic. And it's in, yeah,
It's on the outside of the mall.
this one's on the outside. Yeah, that's right.
And Councillor Luce, and we may get eventually to ask if staff can remember what their recommendations were.
I voted in favor of this recommendation at committee, and I would do so again. I think recommendation number 16 speaks to us reviewing the bylaw and making changes, but I am not ready to do another variance.
Councillor Inkster? Those of us who were not at the committee, this speaks to a conversation the corporate officer had with me recently. Those of us who are not at the committee level aren't privy to the reports and the recommendations, so it makes it a little more difficult to vote on them if they're not here. Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, thank you. It's a little strange that it was voted. A couple of things are just peculiar to me, although I don't have the report, is that one, that it was voted to not approve it. Now there's a change in the idea of two of the members of the committee. I'm not on planning, but I also noticed Councillor Mueller, who usually takes the sign bylaw quite seriously, was not in support of not approving it, but he's not here to speak to it. So I'm confused as to what his reason for not supporting it, because usually he would support not approving a sign bylaw because he has before spoken against variances to bylaws. It's just from what I've noticed historically. But because we don't have any more information, there is some argument for having certain size signage as well as signage that already exists on that side of the building for faster moving traffic. So as opposed to slower moving traffic, and the fact that it's part of a logoed marketing plan as part of the company, and something that I've looked at very seriously over time. So if we delay or don't approve it because of the fact that we're looking at our bylaw, this sign will have to go up in its present form, but then we change our bylaw maybe to reflect the fact that there may be in some cases be a need for a larger sign along the highway. So, you know, I've in the past tended to support slightly larger signs on Toreto that may be in contradiction to our bylaw just because of the nature of the marketing that goes on that side of the building and the quicker moving traffic.
Okay, I see Councillor Seegers and then Councillor Shanks. Councillor Seegers.
Yeah, for the public, the business that we're talking about is actually in the mall, and so this would be the only sign on the outside of the building that would indicate that they actually exist there. And the SDBA and the Chamber of Commerce both came out in support of allowing the variance.
And the community members most directly affected came out strongly against it. Councillor Shanks.
Yeah, I'm not sure they had all the particulars, but this particular sign is not entirely lit. It is in fact just the letters, which do conform to our sign bylaw. If they're under the impression that the sign was larger and to be lit, I can well imagine that they may be opposed to it. But the reality is it's just a background and is not lit up at night. It's just the letters themselves that are lit, which in fact conform to our bylaw.
Does staff feel that they could add anything to this, Claire, or would you rather not walk where angels fear to tread?
I do have my presentation here today that I did give to the planning committee, if you'd like me to go over that.
How long is it?
It's a few slides.
Okay,
But
if it's available, that might be useful.
yeah.
And council will be informed.
Yeah, for those who weren't at the planning committee. Yeah. Connie, I believe it's the third item. Thanks.
Yes.
So I guess you are all familiar where it is and what kind of things we're talking about. One thing that is of note is that it is the sign bylaw does refer to the OCP in terms of design guidelines, and signs should follow those guidelines for the specific area. Such as in the downtown, we're looking at pedestrian-oriented signs, which is what it really talks about, as well as facing the pedestrian streetscape rather than the motorized streetscape. So what the actual variance is for is to increase the allowable sign area of the sign from 3 square meters to 6 square meters, so doubling the size of the allowable sign. And that, yes, the sign would be located on the south exterior wall of Trail Bay Mall facing Highway 101. So here's the sign showing how it looks on the building. As you can see, that is the black border around the lettering. And you can also see the dimensions up here. So staff's recommendation to the plan committee and also to council would be to deny the application for the variance. Part of the reason behind this, if I can go into some of the analysis I went through, was that if council wishes and if the community wishes to amend this to allow for larger signs in the community, it would probably be more appropriate to do it at the whole bylaw level rather than individual signs. One of the concerns that I had after continued thinking about this prior to the planning committee was previously we have had people come in with new small businesses throughout our community and also wanting larger signs. These small businesses may just be starting up and may not have the time or money or resources to go through a variance process. So it would be more fair for the greater community if we were looking at changing the whole bylaw to benefit everyone rather than benefiting those businesses that have the time and resources to go through a variance permit. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and thank you for the slides. That's useful. Is there any further comment before we look at the motion before us? I'm quite aware that we need to begin review of a new sign bylaw. However, the recommendation in front of us is that the committee recommends that council not approve development variance permit 2604 for Lot L, Block 7, District Lot 303. And that's the recommendation before council. All those in favor of that recommendation?
Can you repeat that again, your list?
The recommendation is that the committee recommends, so the recommendation coming forward is that council not approve development variance permit 21604 for Lot L, Block 7, District Lot 303. Plan BCB 10229 for a variance to sign bylaw. All those in favor? All those opposed? That's defeated. Question, point of order from
Yes,
Councillor
so
Seegers.
given that we defeated that, do we then need to make a motion in support of the variance?
Not at this point, but I'll.
Your Worship, council doesn't have to do it tonight, but just to acknowledge that we do have an application in from an applicant for a variance to our sign bylaw. So council has just approved, just passed a motion that it not be approved, that
No,
council not approve the.
We've defeated that.
Yes, right,
So it's a
you've
double
defeated
negative.
that. So you're now left with no direction as
And a
to what
variance
to
in
tell
front.
the
That's right.
applicant. Staff could bring forward a further report to another council meeting agenda, or if council feels it has enough information tonight, you could go on and pass another
I think-
motion that gives direction.
I think council has enough information tonight, but not enough councillors. So rather than me bring it back in 30 days, I wanted to wait until we have a full council. I
Thank
know
you.
some of those councillors feel very strongly about the sign bylaw. So in terms of inclusion and voting, I would like to wait until we have 7 people here,
Certainly, thank you.
because it's still a split. It was split one way coming out of the planning committee. It's a 3-2 tonight, and I have no idea what it'll be for a 7. So, Councillor, other lights on? People want to speak to this? They won't put the sign up over Christmas. Moving on to item 7.2. So we know that's sitting there. It was defeated, and we'll find a process to bring it back. Yes. Because council has to give direction. 7.2, minutes of the Finance, Culture, and Economic Development. First, motion to receive. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Shanks, all those in favor. And on this one, I would like to pull recommendation 13, the library funding request. Any others that people would like to see pulled for discussion? Councillor Seegers?
Sorry, I'm just trying to catch up. Recommendation 9. And then I have one error in here.
Recommendation 9 for further discussion. And there was an error.
Yes, on page 29, that would be page 4 of 8. Second bullet down. Should be First Nation participating artists increased 95%.
That was an interesting report. I wasn't there, or I would have asked how things were fine with attendance, even though attendance numbers were down, and 2 bullets later, attendance numbers were stable. So, it's okay. So, a motion to accept recommendations 2 to 8, to 10 through to 12, and 15, and there's no 14? No. And 15, recommendation 15. So omitting recommendations 9 and 13, and recommendation 1. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Seegers, seconded by Councillor Lutz. All those in favor? That's carried. Moving to item 9, recommendation 9. Community Investment Program Policy Update. That the FCED Committee recommend Council provide direction to staff. Who would like to speak to that?
Thank
I
you.
wasn't at the, I have no idea what it means because I wasn't at the meeting.
Yeah, so this staff brought forward a report with regards to the community investment program. And in previous years, both traffic fine revenue that was dispersed as well as community investment program revenue were done by one committee under one process. And the traffic fine revenue bylaw was still, or policy was still in existence, had never been revoked or canceled by council previously. And so while we approved a new community investment program policy, we didn't have sufficient people at that, or sufficient members of the committee there to allow full discussion on what to do with regards to the traffic fine revenue policy. And so we wanted it to be referred to council so that there could be a more fulsome discussion. Now, we, again, do not have a full council here, so it might be something that we may want to put off till we actually have the full group to discuss.
And until we have some sort of report in front of council to know what we're supposed to be thinking about. So I accept the recommendation that FCD wants it to go up to the council level. If we pass it tonight and carry it the same way it was carried to the committee, then it will be on staff's agenda to bring forward to council with appropriate works. So we just simply need to carry it if we want that to happen. Thank you, Councillor Seegers, Councillor Lutz. All those in favor? So that's carried. Item number 13. I pulled this for discussion, so I'll start the discussion, and I wanted to simply say it's an opportunity. I don't expect the vote to change, especially with Councillors Muller and Wright away today, but it is an interesting example, as was the delegation we had today, about how we deal with budgeting items and whether we deal with budgeting items in a process that compares things or does not. Now, I heard that there were good reasons to consider this outside of the budget process, so I wouldn't mind hearing from staff or others what those might be. But my sense very much is that if we're going to follow a process that allows us to be comparative and treat people fairly within the system, it means that they should in fact be considered when other issues are considered. And when we say no special favors for insiders, friends or insiders, it doesn't mean just the other person's friends, but our friends are okay. And so I know there's people sitting on the library committee that want this to come forward, but we're breaking a process that would normally have this considered at the budget level, which I think Councillor Wright tried to make that point and was carried. So if there are good reasons to bring this forward now, as opposed to waiting, I think that would be useful. I'm concerned that the committee two issues that concern me. One of them is we obviously want the library renovation project to proceed. That's why we appointed 2 councillors to sit on that committee. But I would have hoped that the council liaisons, part of what they took to that committee was a strong view of what council procedures and processes were. So they would have explained to the committee why that couldn't happen out of process, as opposed to, well, this is a way we might be able to get through it. Secondly, I'm quite concerned if the estimate for getting the preparation of an estimate is 50% out, what that'll tell us about the estimates of the committee when they come forward with the actual project. It could be out as much. So there's a lot of reasons why I think this should be done more carefully, put in the budget process compared to other items that we're going to look at that time. So if there's reasons why it should be looked at today, other than that we've already offered $56,000 out of the budget sequence, so let's top it up with another $44,000 out of the budget, out of sequence. I don't know. That's what I'd like to know. Why? What are the good arguments for approving this tonight outside of the budget process? Are there any from staff's perspective, or should I just go straight to council?
Your Worship, I can certainly explain sort of what was the discussion at the committee level as I guess the finance staff liaison there. It really had to do with timing of the project. There's a Canada 150 grant opportunity for $50,000 plus $50,000 matching grant. That money needs to be spent, I'm going to say, by the end of 2017. So the issue is more of a timing that if this goes through the full normal budget process, the loan authorization bylaw process wouldn't begin until May. It takes approximately 5 months for that process to get completed, which means the project couldn't start until that point, being somewhere around October, November, and then just the time to gear up. It would probably cause that Canada 150 grant to have to be abandoned, as if the project was done as a whole. There was discussion about separating the projects and doing sort of the Canada 150 piece now, and this being delayed another year into 2018 once the loan authorization process is completed. That would add additional cost to the project. It was estimated that would probably add about $22,000 to separate the 2 projects and have them run separately, even if this process was to remain the same. I believe it was actually more if it was done as a complete standalone project. So now the urgency was really to try to save money and also to get this project moving forward so they could actually start construction in the fall as opposed to waiting until 2018.
So saving approximately $25,000 is one argument, and timeliness, a self-imposed urgency of wanting to do it in 1 year, not in next year's 2017 rather than 2018. Okay, that's what I heard. And councillors?
Thank you. When this was brought forward, we did not actually have an estimate for what the Class B cost estimate cost would, what the cost of that would be. The 56,553 in number came actually from the money that is already being taxed and that was in the budget already and was no longer needed for paying off the loan for the library because that was paid off this year. So that fund, that's where that 56,553 came from. We didn't get the estimate for how much it was going to cost until the last meeting, and that was when we got it for 102,000.
Yeah, I recall the 56 because there was discussions then about why it should automatically go where it went.
Yes.
Councillor Shanks.
Yeah, I think previously we'd given them some indication of moving forward with the construction. And behind that suggestion was also that this would likely go to an alternative voting process, which would be well received by the public in terms of supporting the library expansion. So those were some of the reasons trying to move it forward.
Mm-hmm. And if you're wrong about the public support? Councillor Inkster. No, if we are, we don't know, right?
No, but I've had the experience of taking referendum to the public before, as you and I know. Inside joke here.
Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, I wanted to vote on this at that point to see it come to a full council, because I believe that if it would have been defeated, it would have just disappeared and not come to the full council. But at that meeting, I spoke to budgetary concerns and the process of budgeting that I had thought that we had all agreed upon. And then historically, I looked at my feelings over the renovations upstairs and the fact that I was uncomfortable with the zero budget the last 2 years, and heard a couple of council members question whether I'd actually had those beliefs. So I'm going to go back to my gut feeling on this and go and not support it, because I really support the library in my brain and my heart, but my gut feeling is to make a point about how we need to stick to our budget, and how previously I should have said something on 3 previous items that I didn't, and so now I better be consistent and say something in this case that we need to stick to a budget and have all these items come forward and be tested and measured against one another at the budget process. I think that this can be done. I hope that this can be done without this particular vote going forward as they'd like it to be, because I think the argument is a strong one for doing the project. And as I said, I'm probably one of the bigger users on council of the facilities, so I understand and I've seen what their needs are. But to follow process, to follow the budget process, our budgetary constraints and needs, and to go with my gut on this one, I won't be supporting it.
Any further discussion? I think we should be able to get a budget approval and an alternate approval process in less than 5 months. 5 months seems like a long time for an alternate approval process for a borrowing bylaw, if you know where it's going. Well, it was suggested that one reason we push it forward tonight is that an alternate approval process for a borrowing bylaw would take at least 5 months, from May through to October. And I'm thinking that if we knew by end of March that the funding was approved, that things could move more quickly than that, and that an alternate approval process could be done in less than 3 months, because you have some public notices you have, but 5 months seems to be a long time.
If you may, Your Worship, these are the numbers actually provided by the ministry as far as the length of time it takes. It's council takes a bylaw to 3 readings, it then goes to the minister for approval. That can take up to a month to get back. Then you've got your 30-day alternate approval process period. Then council can adopt the bylaw, then you can have another 30-day quashing period before it's actually signed off by the inspector. So it's the word from the ministry is expect it to be 5 months. It used to be shorter. It's more actually the turnaround time at the ministry level is what is increasing it. But if I may, I'm fairly well familiar with this from my previous employer. We did a lot of these, and 5 months was a typical time from the time council adopts the bylaw to when you can, or takes it to 3 readings before you can adopt it.
No, thank you. And you
And
just,
to bear in mind that
there's 2 30-day periods in there for the ministry. Yeah.
3 really.
3 for the ministry?
3. The month to get it back from the ministry,
That's right.
then you do your 30-day
No, and
counter-petition
then the ministry
process.
wants it for another 30
And then you've
days.
got another, no, that's the counter-petition
I
process.
know that part. No,
Right.
the ministry is involved twice.
Yes. Correct.
And both times they want about a month.
Oh, I see what you're saying,
That's
yes.
what I'm saying. Okay.
And if I may, part of this as well, just to add to it, is it was pushed to 2018 because the money request here is to get the Class B estimate prepared, so that process wouldn't start until May. So
okay.
the bylaw for the loan approval wouldn't come for another probably 30, 40 days after that period, so.
Okay. And I know there's low risk, and we did start the funding process, so we're all sort of halfway through this already, which is an argument to go forward. But Councillor Lutz would like to speak, and then we'll probably call the vote.
I'm going to vote in favor on this recommendation again, partly because of the Class B estimate. We need that in order to go forward with the alternate approvals. So for me, I think we have to do that step.
Okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried. Thank you, and thank you for your patience in letting us go through that. Item 8.1 is the amended, eventually the amended bylaw. 8.1 Westbrook by the Sea, Clayton Family Lands Limited, official community plan amendment and zoning amendment. First, we do have a report from, thank you. Second, all those in favor? That's carried. And I'll turn to Mr. Thompson to go through his report.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, I have a brief presentation. So, yes, so this is, as mentioned, a rezoning and OCP amendment application from the Clayton Family Lands for the Westbrook by the Sea facility. So this property, located in West Sechelt, northwest of Clayton Park and Trail Bay Estates subdivision phase 1. The property in question is currently zoned RR1 with an OCP designation of residential. The proposed zoning is a mixture of the CD37 and PA1 zone, as well as 3 different proposed OCP designations, 1 for civic institutional, 1 for multifamily mixed residential, and 1 for parks and open space. So the proposal is for a 4-story, 124-unit assisted living and independent supported living facility, as well as a 2-story, 12-unit affordable housing building. This application has previously gone to both planning committees previously and the council previously, and has gone through significant changes since that time. So here is the proposed site plan. Here you can see the main Westbrook by the Sea facility. To north is the affordable housing, as well as you can see here the proposed Clayton Park expansion. So in terms of what these proposed bylaws will do, this area here, this whole area will be the CD37 zone. Well, this park is part of the bylaws getting rezoned to PA1, which is our standard park zone. The OCP amendment is changing the designation of the Westbrook facility to civic institutional, and changing the designation of this northern part for the affordable housing to multifamily, and of course changing this portion to park and open space designation. Here is kind of showing the heights and of the building and how it fits in the land. And just some additional details about some more specific details about the project. So there's 136 total units proposed in this site. So that's the 124 assisted living / independent living and the 12 affordable housing units. The site area is 1.46 hectares. So this is both the number of units and the area have increased from previous iterations, but because both those increased, the density actually does remain the same. So the uses, again, remain the same, except for with the addition of the multiple family dwelling for the affordable housing. So we're seeing independent supported living housing, assisted living housing, guest suite, and multiple family dwelling allowed on this site. It's having a 22% lot coverage, 8.9 meter west lot line setback, and a proposed height of 16.5 meters. So associated with this project are some significant community amenity contributions. So it's proposed that the building's 100% built green gold standard, 100% built accessible or adaptable, that 20% of the site area is publicly accessible open space, the construction of a paved pathway along Highway 101 for the frontage of Trail Bay Estates, some Clayton Park improvements, including paved pathways, bowl lighting, drought-tolerant landscaping, a pickleball court and irrigation, dedication of 1,285 square meters of land as an expansion to Clayton Park, entering into a housing agreement for the provision of 12 units of affordable housing, as well as registering a no subdivision covenant on title to ensure the units remain rental. So a little bit more about the affordable housing. Based on the density lift to get up to the total 136 units, 12 units of affordable housing will be required for the development, and the applicant has opted to provide the affordable housing on site in a separate multi-family building. Part of this is because of the logistics of the different levels of services between your standard affordable housing and what is offered in this facility. The housing agreement would set the maximum rent and how it would increase in time. At the most basic level, maximum rent is approximately equal to the Sechelt median income times 30%. So the recommendation, this is of course the slides that went to the committee, but is that these bylaws do receive first reading and referral to public hearing. And quite the long list of conditions of adoption that staff are recommending. Completion of a traffic impact study and inclusion of its recommendations into a service agreement or a pro rata cash contribution for necessary upgrades. Registering a restricted covenant on the publicly accessible open space to allow public access. Submitting a landscaping plan for all publicly accessible open space on the property to council. Dedicate the 1,200 square meter of land to the expansion of Clayton Park as parkland. An application for a development permit for steep slopes be received and receive council's approval in principle. And that an application for development permit area 7 multifamily for the affordable housing building receive council's approval in principle. One point I'd actually like to mention at this point is that as this is a civic institutional use for the main Westbrook facility, that building will not be required to have a DP under the Local Government Act. There is no allowance for for institutional buildings. So just so that's clear that there won't be a development permit for that building, but only for the affordable housing building. Then completing and implementing a tree protection plan in accordance with our environmental management bylaw, restricted covenant on title which restricts the subdivision under the Strata Property Act, submit a landscaping plan for Clayton Park improvements for council's approval and include the construction of any of those improvements in the servicing agreement, and enter into a servicing agreement for all the offsite works, including the 2.5 multi-use pathway along the northern side of the highway frontage, improvements to Clayton Park, construction of the unnamed access road to urban local standards from Clayton Avenue to the northern terminus of the frontage of the property, and a gravel local road standard for the northern terminus of the frontage to the intersection with the proposed Tyler Road extension and to the western property line of District Lot 1384. This is the paved portion is for access to the facility, and the unpaved portion is for emergency access prior to the remainder of the Clayton subdivision being completed. Construction of a bus stop on the east side of the intersection of Cowrie Street and Clayton Avenue, and all other off-site works and services as required by the Subdivision and Development Control Servicing Standards Bylaw, number 430. And the final recommendation is that, that council authorizes staff to prepare a housing agreement bylaw for the provision of affordable housing in the Westbrook by the Sea facility. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that report. Council. Yes, corporate officer first.
May I just clarify that council previously adopted item 7.1, the summary of recommendations of planning, and that previous recommendation that Mr. Thompson just read included an amendment that council has now adopted, which was that a K be added, which is on page 4 of 7 of item 7.1. I could read it if you like for clarity. K was that also to commence conversations with the developer regarding on-site stormwater management, organics, and pharmaceutical waste and recyclables as indicated in the SCRD referral response.
And that didn't make it over.
That was adopted tonight with these minutes, but that was a planning committee report, so it was just added at the time that was considered.
So you want it added?
No, Your Worship, I'm just clarifying that it was actually added with adoption of item 7.1. Council earlier adopted all the recommendations in 7.1. Specifically, recommendation number 8 is what Mr. Thompson just read, and then if you look at recommendation number 9, it amended 8 and added that K. So just for clarity, besides what was just read, the condition K was also added to that.
Which means it should be considered as anything we do now.
It's been adopted, so yes.
We'll talk about process later. We adopted it as a committee report. Now we have it in front of us for council. We don't have to adopt any further recommendations?
No, you don't. We go proceed to considering the bylaw.
Then why did we have the presentation before the bylaw? So we'll move to item 8.1b, which is the bylaw to amend District of Sechelt Official Community Plan, bylaw number 492, 2010, in support of an independent supportive housing or assisted facility, and that's on page 62 through to 64. And we'll look for someone to move it a first time. Councillor Inkster, Councillor Shanks seconding. Any further discussion? All those in favor of first reading? That's carried. And do we also need a motion to send it to public hearing?
You could.
Councillor Inkster and Seegers. All those in favor? Thank you. Moving on to item 8.1c, which is the amended bylaw, number 25-278, 2016. Can I go directly to this?
You may, yes.
Bylaw number 25, this is page, well, it's amended, so there's no page numbers. The bylaw to amend District of Sechelt zoning bylaw number 25, 1987 by rezoning a portion of District Lot 1385 in the West Sechelt neighborhood from Rural Route 1, Rural 1 zone to a new Comprehensive Development Zone 37 and Public Assembly 1, Park Recreation and Assembly 1 zone in support of us. Supportive living and assisted living residential facility and expansion to Clayton Park. And this is the one that has the amended words or dwelling units throughout it in the section 2 on density. So make sure we have the right one. And this is also for first reading tonight. The actual, okay, that's what I'm looking for. I can't see it. That's the community plan bylaw amendment. Yeah. Could the corporate officer or planner tell me the difference between item 8.1B, which is the official community plan bylaw amendment, which we just passed for first reading and sent to public hearing, and 8.1C, which is the amended zoning bylaw number 25278, 2016, which is the amended bylaw, but which is not paginated. And what I'm looking for, it's okay. What I'm looking for is on the second page. Found it. So we've got first reading for tonight, moved by Councillor Seegers, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Lutz. If we all know what we're voting on for first reading, all those in favor, that's carried. And a motion to send it to public hearing, Councillor Seegers, Councillor Lutz, all those in favor, that's carried. And those needed a majority of council, and they both had full support. Moving on to 8.2, which is the Clayton Family Lands rezoning application for the residential area. And that's page 73 of our agenda package. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Seegers. All those in favor? That's carried. And we'll look to the development planner for another brief report.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is another rezoning application from the Clayton Family Lands for Lot 7 on Barnacle Street. Here's the subject lot. So you can see Barnacle Street up here, Highway 101. So this lot is currently zoned R4 with a proposed zoning of R1. So it is a downzoning application. The current OCP designation is for multifamily mixed residential. The proposed zoning change is consistent with the OCP, provided that the lot sizes are between 350 to 600 square meters. So yes, the proposal is changing it to an R1 to allow for a small lot residential bare land strata subdivision. So this proposal, the recommendation is that the bylaw get first reading and referral to public hearing, and that there be these following two conditions of adoption of this bylaw. Registration of a restricted covenant that gives public access over the proposed strata road and any other pathway, and construct a pedestrian pathway in the unnamed road right away to the east of the property between Barnacle Street and Highway 101. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any questions or clarifications of the planner? Councillor Seegers?
Sorry, I don't have it in front of me in the other minutes. Is this the one where we also asked staff to report back with regards to fully accessible buildings? Is this the development, or are we talking about a different one?
That was, I believe, a delegation that was at the same meeting, but not
Yes.
related to this proposal.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Somebody to move recommendations 2 and 3? Thank you, Councillor Inkster and Shanks. All those in favor? That's carried. And then I'll move directly to the bylaw, which is on page 79 of our agenda package. And I'll look for first reading of bylaw number 25283, 2016, Clayton Family Lands Limited, a bylaw to amend District of Sechelt zoning bylaw number 25, 1987, by rezoning a property in the West Sechelt neighborhood from R4 to R1. First reading moved by Councillor Lutz and Shanks. All those in favor? It's carried. And a referral to public hearing. Councillor Shanks and Lutz. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you for your patience through that paperwork. There are no new business items under item 9, so we're moving to item 10. Business items, 10.1, which is a Bradwell assignment of Sechelt Airport lease agreement. And we have a report from the corporate officer. First, a motion to receive the report. Councillor Seegers and Inksters. All those in favor? And we'll turn to the corporate officer.
Your Worship, I have really nothing else to add besides this report. In summary, this is a proposal to assign a current Sechelt Airport lease, and actually to assign what's left of the term. This would stay within the family. This is due to the previous lessor passing away, and his will granted the lease to his wife, who would in turn like to pass it on to their son, as is set out here in my report. So the request is that council endorse this assignment of Sechelt Airport License Agreement over Lease Lot 1 from Ronald Lindsay Bradwell to Gordon Cates Bradwell, and that the mayor and corporate officer be authorized to execute the attached draft assignment of agreement.
Thank you. Do we have a motion? Councillor Seegers, Councillor Lutz, thank you. And discussion, Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. On page 84, under 4.3, indicates the assignment would be for the remainder of the term, which expires in 2025. That takes into account the additional 5-year renewal. So it would be 2020 with the option to renew, I understand. And if that's the case, I'm totally in favor of this.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you. 10.2 is the release of closed meeting resolutions, which are before us. And there's a number of them from previous closed meetings. So, yeah, thank you. Councillor Seegers moving the recommendations, and Councillor Lutz. All those in favor? That's carried. 5 items released. And then we move to a new business item, 10.3, which comes from the Planning Committee this afternoon, which is with respect to Mission Point Park. And the committee recommended to council to consider and approve, in principle, the building of a band shell at Mission Point Park, that staff identify a person to liaise with the Rotary Club of the Sunshine Coast, and that a staff report come to an appropriate meeting in January 2017, that might be a bit quick, in order to identify a proposed location, size, servicing requirements, including electrical and washrooms, and potential costs to the District of Sechelt. Would somebody from that committee like to speak? The chair, perhaps?
This particular item was introduced, the particular recommendation was introduced by Councillor Seegers, seconded by Councillor Lutz, to bring forward the item to council this evening because of the timing of the issue and the next council meeting that would be, I guess, in mid-January. The information that is included in the recommendation is in terms of information, in terms of design, and any work regarding electrical and sizing and staff liaison person. Most of the information is already contained in some information that staff does have regarding community desire, which is indicated as part of a graph there of numbers that could be graphed to indicate community expectation and or want for a gazebo at Mission Point Park. And also too, staff has done a fair amount of work with the previous discussion on the gazebo and some designs submitted in terms of what would be needed, what location may be requested, what location would fit best, what kind of power would be needed at that location, whether there would be water needed at that location, and the type of gazebo that would probably work best at that location. The picture that was provided, I think, was just an indication of a potential positioning of the gazebo center in front of the ocean seascape, but is not necessarily a representation of what it will actually look like. The drawings following are what it may look like with the with the West Coast log homes and the community forest supplying logs to them to be finished. The month or two between now and that discussion will allow potentially staff to talk to the Rotary Club about the size and the preference of council as to how the building will look, how the foundation will look, and whether the building should have some adaptability upon its original construction.
And further comments, Councillor Shanks?
Yeah, just a minor correction, Your Worship, and it's understandable, but this was actually a recommendation, came from Public Works Committee.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. We're okay.
Councillor Shanks was supportive.
It came from Public Works, Parks and Environment Committee meeting, right, this afternoon? Who did it come from?
Yeah, it came from there. You introduced it. It came from planning.
Oh, I see. Oh. Okay. I misspoke. Yeah. And Councillor Seekers.
Thank you. When the Rotary Club came before us earlier today, they indicated that, you know, as we all know, they do local projects, they do international projects. They're looking to celebrate their 100th anniversary, as well as Canada's 150th anniversary this coming year, and are looking to have this in place for July 1st. Very ambitious. They have already garnered quite a bit of community support with regards to the community forest, providing logs, 2 local buildings, doing some of the work and putting it up. They don't know what the cost is going to be and what the, you know, where the location and all those sorts of things. So this is to actually allow our staff to work with them to be able to come have something in preparation for our budgeting process should they require funds from the district, which would allow us to give it consideration and say whether or not we'll go forward. They may not need any funds from the district. They don't know that at this point. We wanted to bring it forward tonight, given if it doesn't come forward tonight, it doesn't come to council till the 18th of January, which puts it outside of our budgeting process. Thanks.
Thank you for that. That's what I wanted to hear about why it was coming tonight. Any further discussion? Councillor Lutz?
They have presented to the Davis Bay Community Association and have their support.
Do they have a resolution from that association?
That's my understanding.
Interesting. Okay. We have a recommendation in front of us, which is simply for council to approve in principle and require the staff report, and that this go into the budget process, which is not explicit in this, but we know that that's what we really want. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Finally, on to council reports. And item 11.1, and before I leave council reports, I want to ensure that we identify the transitions for community liaisons with community associations. I'll probably do that during my report, but I just want to make sure we don't get through this section without doing that. If you don't mind, I'll start on my left, Councillor Lutz.
I spoke earlier of a meeting with Vancouver Coastal Health. not a whole lot to say about that other than a lot of information was shared. I'll leave my report at that. It's been a busy time, and I wish everyone a Merry Christmas and the best for the new year.
Thank you. And Councillor Shanks.
Being short tonight. So let's see, December 9th, attended the Christmas party, which was extremely well organized. And my thanks to the staff that organized that and put on the meal and put on the karaoke program. Councillor Muller showed a new talent for karaoke as well as carrying a drink around at the same time. And apart from that, what else do we have to do here? Yes, there was a library building committee meeting, which resulted in the previous recommendation coming forward, which received considerable discussion. And then we had our financial committee meeting as well on December 14th. That's all I have to say. And once again, I wish everybody a very Merry Christmas.
Thank you for that. And Councillor Inkster?
Just wanted to mention the Christmas skate for the those on council and staff that have children. It was good to have that opportunity. So I'm glad we have, if the kids don't go to the Friday night event, that they're able to go to the Sunday event. And it was well organized by a couple of our staff members, one off to my right here, who organized that event and made sure there were gifts and food. It's always good to have pizza for kids. They really appreciate that. So kids enjoyed it. So I'm thankful that we do that and that we recognize the families within our organization. I also wanted to recognize two quick things. Habitat for Humanity's event last evening, I believe it was, at Restore, and they brought in a number of people, including councillors invited, and community partners. It was a well-organized event. I hope they keep doing that. It keeps them connected to the community, and probably brought in a couple of issues to, I know, probably all of council who was there's attention. So that was a good way for them to do that over snacks. And I just wanted to mention a sort of a community thing to put council's put their attention to is it looks like, from what I've been able to determine through the business markets and that Rexall has been bought by McKeacham Health, I think it's called. So now the Competition Bureau's involved again. And I just wanted to give council a heads up to what happened the last time. And it looks like they're identifying the Sechelt store as a problem again. So the Competition Board of Canada has identified a number of stores, and it's Sechelt's one of the, I think, 26 in all across Canada. I wanted to let you know. Thanks.
Thank you for that information. And Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. A number of events have been mentioned: the library, municipal hall facility meeting, the Habitat Christmas celebration, Christmas party. A few others I attended: seniors planning table meeting, and that was a follow-up to the presentation that was at council with regards to the age-friendly planning. A couple others. Judging of the downtown Christmas decorations on the businesses was quite fun. Enjoyed doing that. And probably one that I really enjoyed going to, and I believe there was another councillor there, I don't remember who it was the Leap Winter Barn Raiser. So this is an event, or it's put on in conjunction with Simon Fraser University and Community Futures. And what they do is they actually have applications from community people who are looking to start a business, and they provide them with business training, business plan training, and then at this event, they actually present to the public what their ideas are, and we get to vote on them. Some very unique businesses are coming forward, and it really speaks to the ingenuity in our community and the novel ideas that they're bringing to market. And I'd just like to commend everybody who took part for all their enthusiasm and, really supporting our community in that way. I want to wish everybody Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and I know I, for one, am really looking forward to a bit of a break, as I'm sure most of the rest of you are. So thanks, and we'll see you all in the new year.
Thank you for that report. I'll just mention a couple of things. One, a Vancouver Coastal Health meeting, intergovernmental meeting with Vancouver Coastal Health last Friday, I think it was, in which we asked them if they had a plan B for residential seniors care on the coast, and suggested it would be prudent for good planning if they did have a plan B. They said they wouldn't talk about such things in public. And more seriously, that day, we also talked a fair amount about homelessness and about the opioid crisis, which is affecting the Sunshine Coast as well. Not quite in the numbers that the downtown east side is experiencing in Vancouver, but we have had 2 deaths on the lower Sunshine Coast. And just to give you a sense of how extensive this is, we have 700 registered needle users on the Sunshine Coast. Public health officer.
Just here, like Sechelt,
Sun, no, lower Sunshine Coast. And Paul Mardicay doesn't know what the estimate of that would be. He initially thought usually the registration is about 10%, but that would mean 7,000 users on the coast of 30, which, so we know that's a little high. But it's probably close to 35%. So maybe 1 in 3 that's registered. And add that to the fact that when they did a recent test, this information came from Vishnal and the RCMP, a recent test of methadone users, 80 methadone users on the Sunshine Coast, every single one of them had fentanyl in their bloodstream. Every single one. So it's a risk, and it's serious. And we spoke about the kinds of issues and what we could do. Of course, it's self-medication and through difficult challenges. So it is root causes kind of solutions again. It's not something you can just fix easily. But we do have to take that seriously. And the other interesting statistic was that the primary users in the registered needle exchange and in this harder opiate issue are males. The highest group is between men between 40 and 60, and the next user group is men between 20 and 40, so I don't know what your expectations are of hard use and rough life on the coast, but take those numbers into your head and think through the number of users, the fact that fentanyl is in the bloodstream of most of those that are being tested, and you can extrapolate through on that. A much more pleasant Saturday afternoon was spent at the Arts Center, where I got to meet the young artists from across the Sunshine Coast who have created and will be creating the banners that will go up in the summer around Cowrie Street. And that's always a good event, sponsored by Clayton's Heritage Market and the Sunshine Coast Arts Council, filled with families and young children and good photographs. So that was a pleasant time. Before I leave, I do want to rotate the community liaison positions. Our last decision was made on July 20th for liaison appointments between July and December 2016. So these appointments would be, if we can get a motion from council to endorse the following appointments from January through to June 30th of 2017. Councillor Seegers would move to Sandy Hook, Councillor Mueller to East Porpoise Bay, Councillor Lutz to Sechelt Village, Councillor Shanks to Davis Bay, myself to West Porpoise Bay, Councillor Inkster to West Sechelt, and Councillor Wright to Tawanik. Now, not all of those have active associations, but that would be the rotation. And we're doing it now so that you'll be prepped and planned for our communications office and our finance department to talk to you about taking some of the budget information out into the associations in January. So that's part of the reason we want to do that. So I will go through it again. Councillor Seegers will move and Councillor Inkster will second the rotation. And just so they know what it is, Councillor Seegers, Sandy Hook will be Councillor Seegers, East Porpoise Bay is Councillor Mueller, Sechelt Village is Councillor Lutz, Davis Bay becomes Sechelt, yeah, is Councillor Shanks. I will be in West Porpoise Bay. West Sechelt is Councillor Inkster, and Councillor Wright will be at Tewanek. Question or comment or comments?
So I assume that staff have contact information for these? Because that we could potentially have as,
Yes,
I know
Connie
it's been requested that we contact the community associations to get their input into our budget prior to January 20th. So I would appreciate staff providing us with contact information so we can follow up on this.
They'll contact you and they'll provide what kind of information you have to take to them before you can get input.
Just on a list basis.
Yeah. Yeah, those that are active. Yeah. Those that are active. Just to make that a council endorsement, a motion, all those in favor, that's carried. Thank you for that. And our SCRD board representative is on a cruise tonight, so no report from Councillor Wright. He's in a warmer spot. Moving to item 12.1, which is a motion to receive the RCMP detachment report. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Lutz, all those in favor. Any comments or questions on those report? Moving then to the Sechelt visitor information stats. Motion to receive. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Lutz, all those in favor. Any comments on those reports? A good mix of visitors from various places. It's nice to see the annual ones there. And we have two items of council correspondence for receipt. Motion to receive, Councillor Inkster, Councillor Shanks, all those in favor. That's carried. Motion to adjourn. All in favor? Everyone, unanimous. Thank you. Sorry, it seemed to slow down about 8:20, and I got quite tired. Pam. Yes. Westbrook, the affordable housing behind it, yeah.
They want one bedroom. Did nobody stop and think that if you want people here to build all these buildings that they're talking about, you're gonna need people to move their carpenters. And then some of them are gonna have a wife and maybe a child, and you want them to have affordable, be able to afford one bedroom. I mean, how cheesy is that?
We have affordability issues for seniors and singles as well as for families, so we're trying to strike different parts off as we can.
2 bedrooms, but I mean, you don't have to have a big one, and 2 children can share a bedroom when they're little, but 1 bedroom, I mean, really. The second thing was, the gazebo.
Yes.
I hate when somebody decides to tout all the wonderful things they've done in order to get something, and I think actually Davis Bay has got enough, but also Mission Point Park.
Yeah.
It's really pretty. You can see through to the beach. It doesn't need a gazebo. This isn't Carolina. It doesn't need a gazebo